Do you know the 14 traits of successful chiropractors? We've interviewed some of the top chiropractors in the industry and have identified the common traits that they all share. Jump on over to www.chirobusinessmojo.com to get your free report today.
Welcome to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast, where we deconstruct the methods, marketing, and mindset of successful business people and chiropractors from around the world. And now your host, Dr. Richard Day.
That's right, I am Dr. Richard Day, and this is the Chiro Business Mojo podcast. Once again, I am thrilled to be with you here and cannot wait to get started. Well, on the show today, I've got Dr. Michael Gibson, who's committed himself to helping others to live the best life possible. After graduating with a Bachelor of Kinesiology from the University of Western Ontario, he received his Doctor of Chiropractic degree and Masters of Science in Chiropractic Sports Science from Life University. He's the co-creator of Life by Design, owner of the Wellness Group, and co-owner of CrossFit 613. He maintains a busy family practice, a full speaking schedule, and finds time to implement the principles and practices of Life by Design in his own life. Welcome, Dr. Mike Gibson.
Thank you. I'm very, very pleased to be here.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show. Feel free to jump in and fill in any of the gaps I might have smoothed right over in that bio.
Sure thing. First of all, I have an amazing partner who the listeners actually probably know. Kristen McKeag is one of the founders and creators of Eat by Design Coaching. So I'm sure most of the docs have come across her stuff, her recipes and her videos, her meal prep stuff on Facebook. Now up in Canada, of course, it's winter is on its way. So I spend most of my time in hockey rinks. I have two boys, 5 and 8 years old, and I bet I spend a good 12 to 15 hours on the ice with them every week. So that's really where I am if I'm not in my practice adjusting.
Wow, sounds like you're definitely busy with a couple of boys in sports, to be sure. We've had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Jamie Richards on the show before, and he talked about Life by Design. But for those who may have missed that show, why don't you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Sure thing. Life by Design really has two components to it, and the first one is really the lifestyle program that we developed and created maybe 6-7 years ago now, and it was really something that we created for our practice members, for our patients, in the sense that, of course, we're checking and adjusting for subluxation every day in our practice, but we realized for people to really truly get healthy, there were other requirements that they needed to fulfill, namely great sleep, good food, exercise, and a very healthy, mindset. And so we developed this program to help them fill those gaps that we felt were missing. And as we created that, a lot of other docs started to pay attention to what we were doing and wanted to know how they could also share this program in their offices with their patients. And so that's really where Life by Design for chiropractors was born. And fast forward to today, we serve many clients, do a lot of coaching, consulting, and have actually many offices who are actually using the Life by Design brand in their practices.
Wow, what a cool thing. Well, how do you guys split the workload? I mean, what is your role as it compares to his role?
That's a great question. Actually, to be complete, there are 4 partners in Life by Design, Dr. Cratio Jug and his wife, Dr. Rochelle. And so it's really, splitting this workload amongst the 4 of us. And, the thing I think it would be most valuable for your listeners to know is that it's really evolved. I'll say that for sure over the years, but it's really evolved in the sense that we've become very, very clear what each one of us is very, very good at. And so what we've done is we say split the workload. We essentially split it up to things that we are going to excel at, that we are passionate about, activities and tasks and projects that are going to energize us and things that we're going to enjoy working on. And what we found is that the more clear that we've become about what that is for each of us, the better the results and the more the company has actually taken off.
Well, what is one thing that is really exciting you about Life by Design today?
It would have to be LifeCon. LifeCon is our annual live event, and it was here in Ottawa 3 weeks ago now, and it was just a great event. It's always kind of the highlight of our year to get to hang out with some just really, really great docs and get to not only share information, share our knowledge, and do whatever we can to help these docs, but just to hang out with like-minded people is certainly a highlight of our year. But specifically this year, we were very, very excited to introduce what we've called the Ultimate Chiropractic Marketing Blueprint. And it was the first time it was brand new. We had just created this, And essentially, in a nutshell, it's a system. It's a marketing system that has kind of brought all the different pieces of marketing and brought them all together. And it was, the response was just overwhelming. The feedback was fantastic in the sense that for the first time, a lot of docs were really starting to see the big picture when it comes to marketing and seeing how all these individual pieces can fit together to really make sure that they're getting the best return on their marketing dollars.
Wow, what a great tool. I'm going to link to this on the show notes. I'm going to link to Life by Design and Life by Design for chiropractors. I want to shift right now. As you know, this is the Chiro Business Mojo podcast, and I want to drill down into the specifics of the business side of being a chiropractor. And you've worked with a lot of chiropractors, obviously, in your experience. What separates those who are really killing it, who are more successful in practice, from those who, are maybe stuck and right there in the middle?
I think there are definitely many factors, but if I was to pick one, I would definitely say it comes down to self-esteem and, of course, confidence, certainty, really knowing what you know and just being so certain in everything that you say and everything that you do. That I find is really what separates docs in most cases, is that there are some docs who are just unbelievable in terms of their technique, their ability to deliver a fantastic adjustment. They have all the right, communication strategies or scripts, however you want to say that. But they lack that self-esteem versus someone who is just so confident and just carries themselves in that, very certain way. And it really comes across to the patients, but they may not be as good, as masterful with their technique, or they may not actually say the most eloquent of things and communicate in the best way, but that certainty seems to carry them. And I've definitely seen that trend and made that observation over the years, that the biggest, most successful chiropractors always have one thing, and it's really, really strong self-esteem and confidence in who they are and what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. I see that a lot with docs, especially new docs, and they have a real tentative voice as compared to a confident voice. And I know that comes over time, but I also meet docs who have been out there a while, and they still sound tentative. So I think that's a great idea for chiropractors to focus on how they speak. I know I'm always refining it, and especially with this podcast, I'm always trying to improve it.
Yeah, it's something, I've had a lot of associates in the practice. And so just working with them, I totally agree with your sentiment about, newer docs. Definitely they seem to struggle with this more. But the more that we've had, worked in terms of our consulting side of Life by Design and working with docs who have been in practice, and especially docs who have, especially maybe gone, we, Life by Design, we of course are advocates of a third paradigm model where, chiropractic is something that we, the purpose of it is that we need to make sure that the health of the spine and nerve system, is optimized. That's our goal, regardless of symptoms. And so you have some of these docs who have been in practice a long time, and they seem to kind of sway back and forth in their heart. They seem to want to practice in that third paradigm model. And, sometimes that treatment oriented type of practice times kind of sets in a little bit, and they kind of get a little bit uncertain. And I think that's where their certainty and confidence really starts to waver, and it comes across in their communication. So by when they're in front of a practice member, in their mind, they're having this confusion about what it is they really want to do, what it is they really believe, and what type of service they actually want to deliver. And that lack of certainty really tends to come across, and it has a big impact on their success.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and that's a great tip. If I were to summarize, I'd say get clear on what it is you're doing and get clear on the why, the why of what you're doing as well.
Absolutely.
Well, in terms of chiropractic marketing or marketing a practice, what do you see that is working the best today?
I think for us personally, what I will call content marketing is definitely the thing that is allowing us to get in front of the most people and is getting more and more people in our community at least engaged and introduced in what it is that we do.
Is this online?
Yeah, and there's going to be many different ways to do that, and that's another big piece of marketing, and part of why the Ultimate Chiropractic Marketing Blueprint is so exciting is it's actually blending both, online and offline, together into one system, an integrated system, where you're actually leveraging, your resources so that everything kind of fits together in a nice little package. I think that's very, very important. But yes, to answer your question, definitely for us anyway, the majority of that for us is online. Not that I think that has to be true for everyone, but with our strengths, again, back to our unique abilities in my practice, is that we have a group of people who are very strong online with the technology and very aware of social media, how it works and so forth. So for us, it definitely is online, but it's really just about choosing a mechanism to be able to get your brand out there to more people. And unfortunately, the reality is that chiropractic is not something that a lot of people are just can't wait, are searching for in our communities. I hate to say that, but it's true. And so it's just finding, a valuable content, understanding who your market is, what they want, and, allowing yourself to build authority through providing that for them and really beginning a relationship, which then of course opens them up to what else you do and opens them up to the possibility of chiropractic and learning more about it.
Yeah, I think it would really benefit chiropractors, especially ones who have been around a while and haven't really realized what the digital internet age has done and what that's opened up for us, to jump on board and really figure that out and create that conversation around our practices. If they haven't taken advantage of that, that's one mistake they might have made. What other sorts of marketing mistakes are you seeing chiropractors do?
I think, just to touch on a little further, the biggest mistake for sure is not understanding who your market is, who it is that you're trying to reach, who that ideal practice member might be. Really, diving in and spending some real quality time trying to figure out who that is, what makes them tick, what their challenges are, what their pain points are, really understanding them. No matter what type of marketing project you're doing, that is the key piece of it. And if we don't get that right, then really the rest of your marketing, may fall flat. And that's why I think, chiropractors can do the same thing. They can take on the same project. They can take on a dinner with the doc or a screening or a talk or what have you. Two docs in different communities with different markets can do the exact same thing. It falls flat for someone and it just, knocks it out of the park for the other. I think that's the big difference, is that really, you need to make sure that all of your marketing is really aligned with who your market is, who you're trying to speak to, because if it's not, it will not work.
Well, one of the things I've done in practice is try to network with local businesses, especially if we share a common, if my patients are customers of theirs and vice versa. What are some of the ways, I guess, you recommend people make those connections?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always been a fan. I'm not sure if it's named the same thing, in different places, but here we call it the BNI groups. And I've always been a big fan of the idea of BNI groups, where you're getting a group of entrepreneurs who are eager to build their business, to make relationships. And I've always loved the idea. But, and likely a lot of your listeners, have been to these groups and said, oh man, like it was such a waste of time. And I would agree. I went to, many of those when I was early in practice, and they never really worked out the way that you expected them to. And so what I always recommend docs do is actually create your own group. And in doing so, you get to choose businesses who share your values, first of all. You get to choose, people who are very driven, who are full of integrity, that are going to be able to, are really, not just in it for themselves, but actually looking to reciprocate in the sense that, they obviously want to do whatever they can to make sure that you are going to promote them, but also willing to return the favor. It's a lot about who the people are, I think, in these groups. But I think if you're willing to spend the time to search out these people, interview them, make sure they're a great fit, and then be a leader in the sense that you want to create this group and really drive it, have events, bring up opportunities for be a connector in the sense that you can bring other people outside, maybe two different people in these other businesses, bring them together and show how you can bring value, kind of like almost like a mastermind, and you're the leader where you're trying to bring all these people together. So I think BNI is a great way to do it, but I think you need to have someone who's really driving it, and you need to have a really good interview process to really make sure that the people involved are great people who are going to actually be doing it for the right reasons and have the right resources, skills, and tools to be able to actually, work at building everyone else's business in the group.
Yeah, we are doing that here with our practice in Kansas City, and we were going to join a BNI group, but there wasn't one in our area, and it didn't sound like there was going to be one. And so we started a group, and we've had a very similar experience. It's been such a, I think, in a lot of different ways, it's been a great way for us to come together and really establish ourselves in the community as a resource as well, and save a lot of money, because groups like BNI, they charge upwards of $300-400 a year, and we have a small charge, but it's a lot less. So there's a lot of advantages to doing it yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's something that can be so valuable if it's done properly. And if you take control, what I love about what you said is that you become this resource. You become a leader in the community. I think that goes a long way.
Well, what are your thoughts on the effectiveness of spinal screenings?
That's a great question. I think it comes back to what I was mentioning before about your market. I definitely see that it seems to work well in certain markets and not in others. So again, it comes back to your avatar. I know I can say, and only speak from my community here, is that screenings are not effective here, and it's not just because of the way that they're run. I've seen them run very, very well and not be terribly effective. And that's very much changed. Back when I first started practice, there was something that was very, very effective here. But I can definitely tell from interviewing people and speaking to people about it in the community, and I don't mean chiropractors, but, lay people, it's something where they, definitely it's something they don't expect a professional to do. It's not something that is an acceptable, from a cultural perspective. They definitely, their first thought when they see a doctor, a professional doing a screening is like, why does he need to be out here doing this? Does he not have enough practice members? Because here, you line up and you'll wait. A lot of people don't even have a family doctor. It is hard to get in to see a doctor here. So when you have a chiropractor, another type of doctor out in the community, doing a spinal screening, you can imagine the first thought a lot of lay people have is, why does he need to be out here? Is he not, why is his practice not already full? Why does he have to be doing this? And so that may not be the case in a lot of places, and a lot of people around the world do screenings very successfully. I've done them in the past, but I know in my marketplace, it doesn't fly, and it's something that is actually frowned upon by many people in the community.
Yeah, I certainly understand that, going back to what you said earlier about having a confident voice when you're speaking to people because you're confident in what you're doing. I did a few spinal screenings when I first started, and for that exact reason, I thought this is not what a professional doctor, I didn't feel like it was appropriate, and I had a hard time really being legit and credible in that role. And so I've done very, very few. And I know other people have had great success with them, but it's not for me. And I've managed to build a couple of practices that have become very successful without it.
Yeah, and I think to say also to piggyback on that, I think there's a situations and context where it can be very valuable. For example, doing a spinal screening where you've been invited by maybe a large corporation at one of their health events, right? Where you're an invited guest to come and to share your resources with people and to screen people. That can be a great opportunity where there's an expectation because you've been asked and invited to be there as a professional. So I definitely think there are time and places where it can work very well. But, as you were asking about just the general, screening at Walmart, I'm not a huge fan.
Well, I read that you are a productivity junkie, and this is near and dear to my heart because I'm always trying to come up with a way to get more done in the finite amount of time we all have in common. So do you mind sharing with us some of your productivity hacks?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of them. And junkie is definitely the right word here. I'm always kind of tweaking and trying to find new ways to do things faster and more efficiently. I have to say, though, and this has come up a lot actually this week, so this is great timing. The two by far best hacks and that have been consistent for me for quite a while now is taking all social media off my phone, including Facebook. And that might sound funny because, as many of you know, I use Facebook avidly for my business, and it's one of my main marketing tools. But as far as my personal feed and looking at the news feed, I cannot do that on my phone anymore. I've removed the app. And even further to that, on my desktop and on my laptop, I've actually got one of those, Facebook news feed blockers, so that when I go on Facebook to do business, I can't get distracted by the news feed. So that has been huge for me, the amount of time that I know we all spend on Facebook just kind of scanning the news feed. For me, it was immense, and that was a huge, I gained so much time back when I took that off. The second one, this is one that surprises a lot of people, but I don't have email on my phone, and I don't have email even on my laptop. And so when I'm at practice, my setup is that I have a laptop that I bring back and forth, and I do most of my work from my desktop. But on my laptop, of course, you can always log on like online, but I don't have email set up on my laptop. So when I'm in practice, I am 1,000% focused on checking and adjusting and doing whatever else I need to be doing for practice time. But I'm not getting distracted by other people's agendas and by checking my inbox, by checking my email. When I'm there, I'm focused on doing that. So those have been, two of the probably the biggest things that have been the biggest, not just time savers, maybe more efficient, maybe more productive, but also allowed me to stay much more focused on whatever project I am doing at the time.
Well, that's a great, both of those are great tips. I think, especially social media, it's so easy to get in with one idea in mind and then, oh, wait, hey, look, someone had a baby. And then the next thing you know, it's been 15 minutes and, that may have been your window of opportunity to get something done. And instead you just, laughed and looked at things and liked things. And I think it happens without even realizing it. People, at least I have a need sometimes to sort of check out and take a mental break. And what I think might be 2 minutes of that, suddenly it's 15 and whoops, that didn't work.
Yeah. And I guarantee all the listeners, we've all done that. We've all been there 45 minutes later. And it's like, what just happened?
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the patient experience you create in your office. I'm big on this. I think that, from a patient perspective, they may not know what chiropractor A is doing different than chiropractor B. And one of the ways we can really differentiate ourselves is creating a fantastic patient experience. What is it like for a patient when they come in your office?
I think we're very clear, and I think this is something that stands out to a patient coming into the office right away, is that we're very clear about what we do and what we don't do. And so we're very clear right in that initial consult to really be clear about what it is that we do and what it is that we don't do, so that, they can understand what they're, to make sure that they're in the right place, of course, but also so that we can differentiate ourselves, because, a lot of people have either been to a chiropractor before, or they have had this mindset of what a chiropractor is based on stories they've heard. And so I think one of the really important things that we need to do first off is to make sure to reset those expectations. And if you can differentiate yourself and let them know and communicate how you are different, I think you kind of, open the door and have this opportunity to start fresh. So that would be definitely one thing that I think just starts this whole new relationship off on the right foot. The second part I think that stands out to me, as I think through our process, is just the thoroughness of our day one visit. The time that we spend with our consult, really listening, and the series of tests that we do, the series of objective tests that we do to really determine whether or not they are in the right place. That's something that really stands out when we get a lot of feedback from, is just, I so appreciate you taking the time to do all these tests. And also what it does is it creates this sense of curiosity for visit 2, where they're very excited to come back to get their results, because they're like, wow, I did all these tests. I kind of got a sneak peek at what my results were. And I can't wait to come back next time. So I think that's really important, is that they're looking forward to that second visit, versus like, oh man, I don't, I think a lot of times, and actually I've seen through looking at a lot of statistics with a lot of docs, is that is a trouble point for a lot of docs, is that they have, a bunch of people coming in for day one, but there's a good percentage of docs who have a lot of people who don't make it back for visit 2. So I think that probably stands out to me as just how we do day one and how we train on it. We spend a lot of time perfecting that whole process, so that it's just we get the relationship off on the right foot. And then I think the only other thing that stands out is that we get a lot of feedback on is probably just how smooth the office runs. Everything is very, 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 very systematized. Everything just works like clockwork. There's rarely any breakdowns, rarely things that go wrong, only because we've trained so much on it. We've spent so much time, dissecting the systems, creating very detailed systems. When this happens, do this. When this happens, do that. And so our team just work like clockwork, and it's something that people, really notice and comment on is just how well run the business is. And they appreciate that because that allows them to not only get great care, but allows us to be very respectful of their time and get them in and out, with just a great experience every time.
Yeah, I want to touch on a couple of things you mentioned. I'm always surprised when I'll talk to a doc and they'll tell me that, well, they do a real cursory exam, but it might last just a couple minutes and they already know what's wrong with them and they go ahead and start adjusting them. And I think, well, wait a second, what if there's something, a red flag and you didn't really look very closely at it? And I guess B, how do you really know what's wrong if we're trying to fix the cause if you didn't take the time to look for it? And C, that, at least, is how I build so much rapport with someone who is placing their trust in me, is by really taking that time. The person, and this is what I believe, you're being judged all the time, and they're thinking, are they in the right place? Am I with the right doctor? And if you're showing them that, you're not going to spend that time with them, that they're realizing it. Maybe not while they're in the office, but certainly when they reflect on that time later.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And to add to that, I would say what you're also doing is it's the day one is so important in building your case so that when you get to day two and you need to, share your recommendations with them, day one is a big part of that. And so you've got to build your case. And to do that, like you said, you've got to do a very thorough examination. You've got to listen, take the time with them, have objective tests so that they can see that, especially, unfortunately, I hate to say this all the time, but, chiropractic, there's not a huge trust with chiropractic. And so you need to build that trust. And one of the best ways you can do it is to take the proper amount of time to do a thorough examination with objective testing.
Yeah, and the other part of what you said that I think is so great are the systems. When I have any experience, be it going to a restaurant or riding on an airplane, I'm a consumer like everybody else, and I'm looking, am I being well taken care of? Do they seem to know what they're doing? It's no different with our patients.
Absolutely.
This podcast is all about providing some actionable content for our listeners, and you've already done some of that. Do you have anything additional you would recommend, either a single action step or a series of steps for the new doc? And then let's break it down for the guy who's been around a while and is maybe looking for a different direction.
I think for the new doc, my biggest recommendations, going back to how we started this conversation, is the whole self-esteem piece. And so my biggest recommendation is to read Nathaniel Brandon's book, The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, a fantastic book just to get your head around what self-esteem really is. I think that sometimes it can be a little bit of an abstract term, and I think reading that book, although it's a challenging book, is a great place to start to really start to understand what it is and what it is to act with self-esteem. So that would be my recommendation for a new doc. My recommendation for an experienced doc, I think that would have to be, and this is just from my experience and working with a number of experienced docs, is that I think, especially if you've been in practice for a while, I think, when we get out of practice, we're very clear about this vision that we have for our practice. And unfortunately, a lot of times it is a vision that's just kind of like, well, everyone, 500 visits a week is the kind of vision as chiropractors that we should all have. So that's the vision. So whether or not it's their own vision or not, I'm not sure. But as a more experienced doc, I think what I would recommend they do is actually spend some time to kind of go through that process of, okay, I've been in practice for X many years now. I built this. I've done this. What is my vision now? What's my vision for the future? Has it changed? Because what I find for a lot of docs is that once they've been in the game for a while, it changes significantly. And so spending the time to actually sit down and create a new vision for your practice, and I'm always a big advocate of going as far out as possible, even as far as 25 years, but just making sure that they've spent the time recently to really get clear and do some serious thinking about where they want their practice to go and where they want their business to go and where they want to go personally. I think that's a very important thing, so that as you get later in practice, you can continue to move in a direction that is going to continue to fulfill you now, not necessarily based on the vision that you had created when you first got out of school.
That's great advice. We wear so many hats as a business person / chiropractor / marketer, entrepreneur. The list goes on, and it's very easy to lose track of what that big goal is. So if you could put a big lighthouse goal, reestablish that so that you know what direction you're heading, that's going to get you back on course. I want to shift right now and talk about success in general. Now, you've obviously had a lot of success in your career, and we learn a lot from success, but we tend to learn even more from overcoming challenges. Do you mind sharing with us a challenge or a failure in your life that you've overcome and what you learned from it?
Sure. This is easy to pick the challenge because it was a pretty massive one. When I was, well, I guess when my sister was 26, she was diagnosed with leukemia. And so she was 2 years younger than I was. And this was about 3 or 4 years into practice. And this was obviously very shocking. She was extremely healthy, did all the things that I did, that I recommended to my patients that they do as far as health goes. Get checked, eat like this, exercise, very happy or seemingly very happy. And so this was a massive shock. And so over the next 4 years or so, she was in the hospital for most of those 4 years. Multiple rounds of chemotherapy, bone marrow transplants, endless types of, surgeries and you name it. She passed away, 29 years old. And, there was so many lessons, learned and so many challenges in that process, as you can imagine. But, the part I'll mention here, because I think it'll be relevant to those listening, is that forced me to really reevaluate what it is that I knew about health, as it relates to my practice, because a lot of the things that I was doing personally that I had taken very much as dogma coming from chiropractic college, from people who I learned through, I'd really taken, what I realized, the big observation was that a lot of what I had learned was taken very dogmatically, and that I hadn't really done my own research. I just took it at face value and said, well, they said this professor told me this, so it must be true. And it really made me just, question, because you can imagine if I'm my sister's advocate, I'm the person who's giving her advice. I've given her this advice, and she has leukemia now, and she passed. You can imagine my thought process is that, could this outcome have been different if I had given different advice? And so you can imagine how that affected me. And so to answer your question, what did I learn from this? It really was that you really need to think, and, don't take information at face value. You need to do your research. You need to investigate everything and really evaluate everything that you do believe, and take the time to do that. And I think this is why, I find self-esteem is such a critical piece of success for any entrepreneur, any business owner, any person, definitely every chiropractor, is because in that process of doing my research and learning and soul searching and asking myself the hard questions, I did realize that there was a lot of things that I could have given better advice on. But what it did is it really built my certainty to now, when I give recommendations, I know this is the best thing for that person. But it unfortunately wouldn't have happened without that challenge.
Well, Doc, thank you for sharing such a deeply personal story with our listeners. I want to talk now about success in general. Who do you think of when you think of the word success, and why?
Wow, that's a good question. Who do I think of? To be honest, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, as far as the word success goes. And I think there's a reason for that. And I think it's because I really do believe that success is something that is defined differently for every person. So success for you may be very different as success would look for me. And, the first thing that came to mind when people say success, and I have given this a lot of thought as far as, creating my own life and what success looks like for me in the past. But the thing that I always come back to is my kids. And the reason I do that is because, of course, they are one of my highest values, 5 and 8 year old boys. They are a huge part of my life, and my time with them and the relationships that we're building now are, one of my highest values. And so when I think about all that I do with work, with Life by Design, with my practice, with everything that I do, I think, the real goal of all of these things is, of course, to bring value back to me. And because my kids are one of my highest values in the relationships with them, is that success to me is being able to spend quality time with them, to build those relationships, and to be able to, from a financial perspective, because of my success in business and the value I'm creating to others, to create a life where we can do what we want to do, to create the life we want together, and in the process build these amazing relationships. And so when I see other people who have amazing relationships with their kids and those people that are most valuable to them, that's really what pops in my mind when I think about success and what it means to me.
Well, one of the things that jumps out to me in listening to you speak is that there's an empowerment. We're not waiting for someone to come save us or help us be more successful. We are adding value, and we are the architects of our own success. Am I getting that correct? Because that is the language I hear you using.
1,000%.
Well, as we shift into the final thoughts of this interview, it's been great so far. What's the best business advice you've ever received?
The best business advice came from Dr. Steve Hoffman, and it came out at TS, Total Solution, the CLA program out in the mountains in Colorado. And he said something to me that I'll never forget, and it was never forfeit the truth for acceptance. So again, that self-esteem thread was a big one. We were doing one of those, I'm not sure what you call them. You climb up the ladder and you fall back in the group, and one of those trust building exercises. And he said it to me when he was at the bottom of the ladder, and I've never forgotten it. And it was the best advice, both personally and from a business perspective.
Well, there is no shortage of people who will give you their opinions in the world, and not all the advice we receive is good advice. Can you recall a really horrible piece of business advice you were given?
Yes, and specific to chiropractic, I was given the advice not to bring on an associate until I had built my practice to full capacity. And that, as I reflect back, cost me a lot of money.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, there might be some variation in that given, what's going on if you're in a big or small town, but I think you're absolutely right. I think bringing more people in is probably going to be helpful in growing the practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for your time today. You have dropped a lot of value bombs here that I think are going to be beneficial for our listeners. What is the best way for people to find you and find out more about what you do?
Yeah, I think probably the best way is Life by Design for chiropractors.com. That's the branch of Life by Design that we coach and consult chiropractors through. We have our podcast there, which I'd really encourage people to go out and listen to. And then if you'd like to reach out to me personally, my email is mike@lifebydesign.com.
Well, Dr. Mike Gibson, thank you so much for adding value to this podcast by giving us your time today.
Thank you so much. It was great being here.
Thanks for listening to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast at www.chirobusinessmojo.com.